Welcome to Bound to Rise, a podcast presented by the Horatio Alger Association of Distinguished Americans, a member-funded educational organization committed to ensuring the American dream for future generations. It does so by providing scholarships to deserving students who have overcome adversity. These scholarships are more than just financial assistance. They are a bridge to higher education, a vote of confidence, and a foundation for future leadership. This podcast is a platform dedicated to sharing the extraordinary stories of resilience and success of these Horatio Alger scholars and alumni. In this episode, we speak with Annika Ariel, an inspirational scholar on the path to law school, where she plans to shape policy to make technology accessible for all. During our conversation with Annika, she shares her experiences growing up, the challenges she faced advocating for herself as a blind student, and the mentors that have helped her along the way. So we're here with Annika Ariel. So maybe if we could start out, be telling us more about your own Horatio Alger story. What kind of brings you here today, from growing up through school to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Santa Rosa, California, which is in Sonoma County. Um, Growing up, I had a pretty minor visual impairment. Like I basically saw everything double. My home life was kind of not fantastic. My mom is a part-time ESL teacher, so we didn't have a lot of money, and my father was kind of very, very absent, progressively more so throughout my life. I also grew up in a town where I'm half Turkish. I was pretty much the only kid like that. And combined with other things, I was very into reading books as a child, probably less playing sports and that kind of thing. When I was about 15, I lost most of the rest of my vision. So now I can't really see it all out of one eye, and I can see a little bit out of the other eye. So I used to have a guide dog. She's since retired and is now a very spoiled pet. And now I use a white cane. I can read text if it's really, really, really big and very close to my face. I mostly read Braille or use audio. And one of the things that I really experienced was my high school didn't know what to do with me. They didn't really know what to do with an academically minded blind girl. And I'd say probably every month, someone would be like, shouldn't we just send her to the school for the blind? And for some people, maybe that would be the right choice. But I was in all AP classes. I was first chair in band. I was captain of the academic decathlon team. I didn't want that. That wasn't right for me. And so I really had to, I'm like 15 and I'm reading the ADA, the IDEA, just so I can stay at my own school with my friends, with everyone I know and what I've grown up with. I was successful in that, and I was admitted on a scholarship to Amherst College in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts. While I was there, I double majored in English and political science. I was captain of the mock trial team. I was president of the Roosevelt Institute, which is a student policy run think tank. I worked in the Career Center and helped them develop resources for diverse candidates. And I also interned in the Senate. All of that eventually I had this real interest in technology and technology policy specifically because having access to assistive tech really made it possible for me to succeed in high school along with hard work. But being able to have access to my schoolwork, I needed that. After graduating from Amherst, I joined Google, where the first 2 years I was there, I was a business analyst. And then I spent the last 2 years working on responsible innovation, so AI principles and governance.
Wow. I want to roll back to
Yeah.
childhood, and we'll go back and forth along the way. But rolling back to childhood, it seemed from what you mentioned there wasn't, dad was in and out of the picture. The school seemed to be pushing you to go into this other program. Annika, leave this program and go into this other program. What motivated you to stay where you were when you have, it appears, different angles pushing you away to just go this way? What motivated you as a 15-year-old to stay that course?
Yeah, I would say part of it was definitely my mom, who was very, despite like not having a lot of money, wanted me to go to college, wanted me to get an education, kept telling me to become a lawyer, and now I'm going to law school. Um, a lot of it was my mom. A lot of it was also, I just liked academics. I really liked reading. I was a total nerd. I played clarinet pretty seriously since I was, I want to say 10 or 11. I really liked being in band. All of that, I wanted to stay. And I knew part of that was having to learn Braille and how to use a screen reader alongside doing my math homework. And if that's what it took, I was fine with that.
Wow. Your mom obviously sounds like one of the major influences in your childhood. Were there was there anyone in the school that was also on your side saying, Annika, stick with it? Or did you feel alone other than your mom championing you?
I would say my 12th grade English teacher, Paul Vanek, was very invested in me and wanted to make sure that like I would succeed. So when I actually when I got into Amherst, I remember I was taking his AP English class, and Emily Dickinson lived near Amherst. Like, her house is pretty much on campus. They also have a very cool garden. I remember we were like doing, I think, an AP practice test or something, and he was like, "Oh, you should look at the bottom." And I looked and it said Trustees of Amherst College. And I thought that was super cool, especially because I really liked reading, loved books, really enjoyed high school English, probably a bit too much. They wouldn't let me take 2 English classes my senior year, but I did ask. And I think he was also a pretty big influence on me.
Got it. When you got to Amherst College, did you feel you found your place? This is where I want to be. This is exactly what I've been trying to get to all these years.
Definitely not initially. A lot of it was, Amherst is in the middle of nowhere in Massachusetts, slightly less middle of nowhere than Williams College, so should I add that? My family didn't have a lot of money. I was on a lot of scholarship money, including from the Horatio Alger Association. And I think that, I kind of stuck out there. I stuck out as being the only blind girl in my class, the only blind student in my class. And then for the last 2 years, the only blind student at all and the only student with any kind of visible disability. And I remember my first semester, like, people in classes would talk and I would have to look up like half the words they were using, because it's a lot different if you come from, a prep school background compared to a mediocre public high school background. But I think by the time I graduated, I really had made Amherst like my place. I was involved in a lot of leadership stuff. I was a student appointee to the Presidential Task Force on Accessibility Inclusion. I used to joke that I would sign up to meet with our president then was Biddy Martin. Now it's Michael Elliott. I would sign up for Biddy. She was on a first name basis with everyone. Biddy's office hours at the beginning of every semester, and then wait for the semester to tell me what we needed to talk about. So I would say by the time Amherst was not my place initially, and I think a lot of higher education that maybe hasn't really considered diversity has that experience, but students make it their place, and I was able to do that.
Wow. You kept going. You had
Yeah.
the obstacles in high school. Amherst wasn't just, okay, you got to campus and, I found my dream place. You kept pushing. Was there anyone on Biddy's Hours? Was that one of your role models, mentors at Amherst College?
Oh, at Amherst, there's so many. Hard to pick just a few. The faculty at Amherst are really, really, really amazing. Like, I can't say enough good things about them. I would say probably some of the most influential ones were Professor Amelia Worsley. I signed up for her class on William and Dorothy Wordsworth when I was a sophomore. It was my first, I believe it was my first 400 level seminar class. And I guess we kind of joke about it now. She rejected me at first. You had to apply to be in the class, and she totally rejected me. And then, like, 4 weeks later, she was like, "There's a spot that just opened up. Do you want it?" And I took it immediately. I was very excited for it. And then one of the issues we ran into was she wanted to use an edition of a book that was not available accessibly. Usually the library didn't have any issues getting accessible copies. As I recall, this book was obscure enough that it was going to take them weeks to source a copy. And she, at the time, and I believe still now, Amherst was using a scanning process that basically destroyed the book. You had to like tear the spine and you know what I mean? she just gave the library her copy and told them to do whatever they wanted to do with it. And that was like, oh, whoa, this woman is really invested in my education. And then I just kind of kept doing research with her. I did a lot on, basically, I ended up doing a lot of work on 19th century British literature. I went to some archives in the UK and I started noticing that there was a lot about William Wordsworth, the poet's eye condition, that either wouldn't be mentioned in biographies or it would be like one sentence. And for me, I'm like, oh, wow, that's a big deal. And they're not talking about it. And so I started looking at all these letters that kind of start with like, I I would be writing to you, but I can't because my eyes aren't working well today. So my daughter or my sister is transcribing this. And that kind of prompted me to like start thinking about the ethics of all of that and what gets recorded and what subsequently makes it into the historical record. So I wrote a conference paper on a related topic, ended up presenting it at the Wordsworth Summer Conference in 2017, I think. And that was really exciting. I was one of 2 undergrads internationally doing that. And she ended up being my thesis advisor, and I ended up expanding on that work a lot.
Wonderful. You mentioned early on, and your mom had said, you should be a lawyer.
Yes.
Now, I think every child grows up with these visions that aren't necessarily completely accurate of what a lawyer is and what a doctor does. And then there's these areas that they don't even know of exploring because they weren't exposed to it as a child. So, young Annika being told you should probably be a lawyer, you obviously went into the literature area, which is great practice for being a lawyer. What was the lawyer you thought you were going to be, and what is the lawyer you are going for now?
Yeah. So I did also major in political science, both English and poli-sci. So I had that political background. And then I did work in the Senate. And that was when I started noticing that all of these people who were thinking of these important policy considerations that affected the technology I used every day, that I didn't really have a choice about using as a blind woman, they were all lawyers. And I knew I wanted to be in that room and helping shape policy. So at the time, my idea was, okay, I'll graduate. I want to go work at Google for a year. At that point, I already had an internship and I decided to just keep going. During that year, that was just supposed to be my gap year, COVID happened. And then I got promoted, and then my work kept being really interesting. I was doing all these cool things. And so law school, it was always in the back of my mind, but it was really in the back of my mind. And then generative AI jumped to the forefront, and everything in the news was about it. A lot of people were thinking about the new ways it could be used. The public was always talking about it. I went from no one really asking me about my job to having to be like, no, sorry, I can't share that with most of my friends. And that reminded me of that interest I had had in technology policy and reminded me that I wanted to be in the room. I wanted to be having these discussions. And so I studied for the LSAT, ended up taking it, and still trying to figure out where exactly I'm going to law school. But right now I've been accepted to UC Berkeley's School of Law, UCLA's School of Law, and the University of Michigan School of Law.
Congratulations. Did why was it Google? What was it? Why did you mentioned, and I wanted to go to Google. What was it about Google that drew you to them when you graduated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's kind of the easier answer, which is I was an intern there and they gave me a return offer. So it was one of the easier paths I could take. More broadly than that, though, I grew up in Northern California, and I remember in my high school speech class, the guy next to me one day, I guess he had a family friend who worked at Google or something, and he was saying, like, I got to go visit Google's campus, and they had all this cool stuff there. And I was like, huh, that sounds kind of fake, but okay. And then it turned out they did have all that cool stuff there, so 17-year-old Annika was wrong. But I think a lot of it was, I knew Google was really at the forefront of technology. I knew that they were working on accessibility and they had a lot of interesting people there doing that work. And it was also, I knew I wanted to develop my technical skills because I didn't take a single STEM class in college. And I wanted to learn to code. I wanted to learn SQL. I wanted to learn R. And Google provided me all of that support. They did an amazing job. And I think, knowing, even now leaving to go to law school, I am so thankful for the 4+ years I've had at Google because I feel like I had unmatched training and opportunities.
What it sounds like Google gave you so much opportunity, etc. I feel again there's a pushing or this tipping point of it's got to be probably pretty great to work at Google, and you're now working in generative AI, the cutting edge of things. Why not just, hey, I'll keep this? Why? What keeps pushing you now again to jump into law school and embark on that?
Yeah, so Google does fantastic work. I think I want to take it broader. It's great that Google has AI ethics teams, but what I'm thinking about is like, what about a small startup that wants to do the right thing, but they don't know how, and they don't have guidance or anything to help them at the moment? And I'm also thinking, what about companies that, maybe are a lot larger, but don't have an AI ethics team? And they want to do the right thing, but how do they figure that out? So I want to be helping guiding policy that goes beyond Google.
Pivot a little bit here on, as you mentioned, ethics and almost philosophy and where things are going. And on a different level, we have opportunities here in America that other countries don't have. Companies like Google that are spawned out of innovation and pushing things forward. How do you see that the free the free enterprise system itself? Are you seeing it in action at Google? Are you feeling it personally? We hear about it around the world that people don't have these opportunities because they don't have a
Yeah.
system like this that can push and innovate and fail and succeed. Um, do you see that personally, and as well as in the work that you're doing at Google?
Yeah, I want to talk about it personally first. I would say I am so thankful to be in America. I'm half Turkish. And in Turkey, if you're a blind woman, especially if you're young, like you don't get an education. You definitely don't get the education you get from Amherst College. And we have laws in the US that made it so that I could succeed on an equal playing field and I could compete in the system. Accommodations like giving me something in Braille, it's not giving me an advantage, it's giving me access to the system so that I can compete at the exact same level as everyone else. I think that's something that's really unique to America. I mean, even I remember when I was in Paris a few years ago, and I literally walked into, like literally, our canes clashed, another blind person. And we got to talking in like, a mishmash of like French and English. My French was very bad. Her English was much better than my French. And she was like, yeah, if I wanted to learn how to use a cane in France, I would have had to go to a school for the blind and I wouldn't have been able to have been mainstreamed. And I was like, oh, in the US, it was not a given, but I was able to argue and I was able to stay in public school and I was able to learn how to use a cane. Like it was hard. I had to fight for my rights, but I had those rights, even if my school wasn't necessarily supportive of them. And that's something that is so unique to America.
Wow. People like yourself we'd refer to as change agents. And I know it was part of the application, referring to yourself or describe yourself as a change agent. It seems like you're on that cusp of it again here, and you kind of referenced it a little bit in our last questions and answers. Annika, the lawyer, looking forward, where are you going to apply that change next? Where do you see yourself after you're done law school at any of those amazing schools that you mentioned you've been
Yeah.
accepted to?
Yeah, I guess to go back a bit from your question, throughout law school, I wrote some of this in my law school applications. Like, I know I will probably be, if not the only blind person, one of very, very few blind people. So I think part of me being there is also showing people that, like, disabled people can compete at the same level as everyone else. Like, I did at Amherst and throughout sort of my education. And also reminding people that, like, when you're on a hiring committee, if someone with a disability applies, don't immediately discount them. I know that's not legal in the US, but there is still a level of unconscious bias. And getting ahead of that bias because, say you went to Amherst and you knew a blind girl and she was president of all these clubs and she worked at Google. That's different than if you went through your life and you never knew anyone who was blind. And you're going to be thinking of that blind job applicant differently than you would have otherwise just by virtue of having known me. So there's that through law school. Looking ahead, I think I see my career in law. I probably plan to begin working at, a larger law firm because I have seen the unmatched training and educational opportunities that I've had at Google that I think corporate America does a really good job of giving people. And then eventually I want to pivot into working for the government, working in an AI policy area, and helping make sure that the tremendous innovation that is in this country is accessible for the people who need it and is something that is free and open and available to all.
That was wonderful. I want to make another little pivot. What we're going to be doing in the near future, actually this coming summer, is we're having the American Enterprise Institute. So we're taking opportunities that Horatio Alger provides here for undergraduate scholars, graduate scholars to middle school. So trying to encourage them, inspire them, educate them on the opportunities of the United States before they even get to high school, so it can help shape their path. So this is a two-part question. The first part, and then but all geared towards these middle school, these young folks that we'll see in Washington D.C. this summer. If they were to hear you, if you could give yourself a piece of advice now, knowing now what you know now, back to young Annika growing up, what would it be?
I think a couple of things. One pragmatic, one more broad. The pragmatic one is you have access to a tremendous wealth of information now, more information that is easily accessible to you than has ever been available at any point in human history, just for having access to, a search engine such as Google or another one if you want. You can find out about the world around you. There is so much you can learn just from getting online. And you can use that to find scholarships and to find opportunities that take you beyond where you're from, to meet people that you never would have met otherwise. And I think that's an amazing opportunity and a responsibility that should be taken seriously. And I think it's something that it's so commonplace to us to have access to all this information that we forget how incredible it is. The second, more pragmatic piece of advice, it's interesting. Last night after the committee and finalist dinner, I was on the phone with one of my mentees who she just turned 21. She's taking the LSAT tomorrow, actually. And one of the things that I have talked to her about is like, yes, I care about you succeeding on the LSAT. I care about you doing well in your career. But what I care about more than all of that is being a good person. Like, you can have fantastic career accomplishments, and if you're not a good person, if you're not helping the people around you, if you're not mentoring others, then I don't care as much about all of the rest.
Another one geared for the middle school population that we'll see this summer. What do you tell a young person about the American dream today?
I would say that in some ways, the American dream is now more accessible than ever. We have technology that, especially if you have a disability, helps level the playing field for everyone. We also have, like I was saying earlier, access to this huge wealth of information. Previously, maybe you were dependent on seeing a flyer. Now, if you Google scholarship opportunities, you have thousands immediately at your fingertips. I would also say that elite institutions are trying to reach out more than maybe they ever have before. I graduated from Amherst with no debt. The Office of Financial Aid was, it was not totally smooth sailing for 4 years, and I'm not going to say it was, but they came through for me time and time again, and I graduated on time and with no debt. The American dream is out there, and there are institutions and others who want to help you reach it. You have to put in your own work, but there are people to help you along the way.
Beautiful. You've learned a lot of lessons up until now, and you're going to embark on your law education and your career after that. What are some of those lessons that you love to impart on other Horatio Alger scholars, maybe potential Horatio Alger scholars?
I think one of the ones that comes to mind to me, maybe a bit more than it should, is don't let anyone put you in a corner. Don't let anyone don't let anyone make you feel small or unimportant, because chances are they don't know what they're talking about, and chances are the more important people know that's not the case, and the people who care about you and want you to succeed definitely know that's not the case. I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice I could give.
Wonderful. I only have a few more questions left on here, and then anything else you want to share and impart on us. Now we're looking ahead.
Yeah.
Annika's legacy. When people think about your life, what do you hope they remember and take away?
I think, like I was saying earlier, I hope they remember me as a good person. And I hope they remember me as someone who does the right thing, even when it's really difficult. I think for me, going to law school is a step in that direction because I am, going to at least take a break from my career and then come back with a JD, come back with a lot more knowledge of American law, and come back as a lawyer who is more adept at shaping policy and who, I have my analytical research, I have my coding and analytical research skills, adding in legal research skills to that. And I think as long as I'm doing that to help make society better, especially with the enormous impact technology has, making sure that technology is usable by people, I think that's really where I want my legacy to be. Making sure that all of this American innovation going towards technology is for good.
Wonderful. Where do you see, and I know you mentioned it previously, with your research and the work that you're doing now, you can't say stuff, but obviously AI, generative AI, large language modeling, grade school kids know this stuff now.
Oh, wow.
Where do you see our future in 5 years, 10 years? There's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of unknown. Where do you see the future of AI in the next few years and decade or so?
Hard to say. I would say, if you asked someone this question 4 years ago, they would probably answer completely wrong. So I'm very cautious of that while talking. I would also say, it's just so hard to say that I don't know if I can give you a good answer because it seems like stuff is evolving very quickly. I think I can say instead what I hope would be the case. I really hope that this technology, which can save people so much time, I've seen it in my own life, save me a lot of time, is used for good. And I think when it comes to school kids, one of the things I'm thinking about is maybe not using it to create writing that you pass off as your own, but inputting some of your own writing and then seeking general feedback along a theme. So, maybe you make one mistake in one paragraph and then it doesn't happen again, but there's another mistake that you make time and time and time and time again. Having AI to, be that thing that points out, hey, you're doing this wrong. Maybe your writing would flow better if you did this.
Cool. And you gave away no secrets there from Google along the way. Fun question to wrap it up, and then anything else you want to impart. But fun question: outside of work, outside of school, what does Annika love to do?
I listen to a lot of J-pop.
Okay.
I really like journaling. My friend Andrew Leland, who wrote a book called The Country of the Blind, which was published by Penguin Press, and it's been reviewed in the New York Times and the Boston Globe, and I did an edit of it, so I'm in the acknowledgement section. He told me that one of the things that he did to help motivate himself to write 500 words a day was he and his friend had this challenge, and I think they had like an Excel spreadsheet, where if they didn't do that, they had to give $15 to a charity organization of the other's choosing. Which, so even if you don't follow up, there's still really good outcome. I thought that sounded cool, and so I donated some money anyway to Bookshare, which is an organization that basically provides accessible materials to students with disabilities. And then I decided, okay, I'm just going to try and write 500 words every day and see how long it lasts. That was in December 2021, and I have not missed a day since. I discovered that you reach a certain point in Google Docs where it tells you have to make a new document. I think for one doc that was around 405 pages, maybe the other it was 415 or something. So that's, I don't know, I find that really good to both reflect on my day, and also I feel like I've been doing it so long now that like, I'm not a superstitious person, but I'm like, I'm not going to stop now.
Yes. You ran out of a Google Doc. That is
I
got to
did.
be That I've never heard of that happening before. That's very impressive.
I had not either. And I remember in the second dog, once I made it to 405 pages, I was like, whoa, isn't it going to cut me off? And then it didn't. And then it did at around, I want to say 413.
Well, they got back to it and they said, someone's actually hit 450 pages.
I'm probably a legend in some random part of Google I have no interaction with. They probably don't even know it's an employee.
Exactly. Wonderful. How does those personal interests obviously vary, a blind author that you're connected with, how do they contribute to your overall well-being?
I would say writing those 500 words a day is just a really good way to reflect on my day. And, sometimes it helps me calm down if things were stressful. And sometimes it makes me think like, oh, wait, why am I writing about that? That's interesting. I didn't think about it much until now. And then it gives me that time and space to reflect. It's also, I think there's something to be said for daily discipline. And doesn't matter how tired I am, I still do it anyway. I'm sure there's been research by people much more accomplished in this area than me on that kind of thing, but I have found it to be very just generally good for my mental health. I don't know what the science behind it is or anything, but it does work, at least for me.
Have you written your 500 pages or 500 words a day since you've been here?
I did last night, and I will tonight.
All right. Wonderful. Those are all my formal questions. Is there anything else you'd love to impart or share, or anything we didn't cover in an area that you want to explore?
I think just going back to middle school students, something else I would say would be to really use the resources at your disposal. If you have a teacher who really supports you, talk to them about what they see, how they think your future could be, or something like that. Just really focus on people who want to help you and really take advantage of the tremendous resources available at your disposal.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Bound to Rise. Annika's story reminds us of the incredible impact one individual can have on shaping a more inclusive future. We hope you leave this episode feeling inspired to challenge the status quo, to embrace technology as a tool for change, and to pursue your American dream while forging a path for others. Please visit horatioalger.org to learn more about the Horatio Alger Association and its scholarship opportunities. And subscribe to Bound to Rise to hear more inspiring stories from Horatio Alger scholars and alumni.